Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sasquatch Beyond the Outpost. I'm your host, Jim Myers.
And I'm your co-host, Sibylla Irwin.
And as you can tell from the backdrop, we are not in our normal recording location. We are actually in Estes Park. I am anyway, in Estes Park
Right?
for Bigfoot Days. And we have the privilege of interviewing the three guest speakers who are here for this event: Cliff Barackman, Mireya Major, and Russ Acord. And we're going to have about 20 minutes with each one of them, which is going to begin just a few minutes here. But we wanted to do a quick intro before Cliff came as the first guest.
So exciting.
And Sybilla's in Texas. She's our remote hand in this event. So, um, but the this is, I think, the second year we've done a podcast from here. And the first last year we interviewed Ronnie LeBlanc, and it was a great interview. We just interviewed him on his own. This year we can do all three of the speakers for about 20 minutes each, and got a lot of questions for each one of them. And we're going to give our audience a chance to ask one or two questions of each guest. And I'm going to have to keep an eye on the time to allow that to happen.
Right.
But in fact, I'm going to bring my phone over here and on a stopwatch. So just some quick housekeeping things before we get into our first guest is, as we said on our podcast last week, and I was accused of doing too much blah blah before we got into our guest. And sorry, you're going to have to live with a little blah blah because this is a podcast that's not just the podcast, but it involves Sybilla's research, my research, and the podcast, and
Yeah.
the Sasquatch Outpost. And so
Right.
we're trying to get the escape room done for an open in probably mid-June, and we're on target for that to happen. So the first Bigfoot themed escape room in the Front Range, and the only escape room in Park County when it's completed. And it's going to be a really fun event. So I encourage everyone who comes through Bailey to book their spot, which we'll probably start booking during the first week in June. And we'll have a ribbon cutting, official opening, and everything during that
Nice.
week.
How long do they have to complete the?
They have 1 hour to complete it, and if they don't get to see how it ends. So it's not like you get locked in. If you've never done an escape room, people think you have to escape. No, you have to finish the puzzles so you can get out of the room and see the ending, and the ending is going to be worth waiting for. But if you don't finish the puzzles, you don't get to see it. So,
Right. Right.
and yeah, a lot going on this summer with Rabbit Hole Adventures. Please look us up at rabbitholeadventures.co, not .com, and you'll see all the trips we've got lined up, and you can book your spot if you are interested in joining us on one of those. We're excited to have Cliff Barackman. Is that the right pronunciation?
That's how I say it.
Okay, that's good enough for me. So glad to have you. Appreciate you giving us some time today.
No worries.
And now, Cliff, one thing that we share in common is we both own and run museums. Yours is the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. Ours is the Sasquatch Outpost in Bailey, Colorado. I need to get to yours because you were one of the inspirations. You and David Becerra were the two inspirations for me starting my museum. So I'm curious to know what got you started with what inspired you to do your museum.
Well, after the show went off the air, I was kind of faced with the dilemma because TV doesn't pay that much. It's not like you can't have a job, right?
Sure.
So I was faced with the dilemma: do I go back into the classroom? And if I was to be to go back into the classroom, and be an elementary school teacher again, I would have had to have gone and take a lot of master's units. So that's because a lot of people don't realize that teachers pay out of pocket to go constantly going back to school. You're required to do so to update your credential. And
That's
my
right.
credential had expired in the 9 years that the TV show was being filmed. I would have had to pay something in the terms. I looked into it. I think it was like $6,000 to go in and grab these units that I would have had to do. And all teachers face this. Teachers are the brunt of many scapegoating. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, but then Dave and Melinda and Lauren Coleman, and like they had successful museums, and I had all this Bigfoot stuff, and because I was an elementary school teacher before I was on the show, that's where they got me. I'd never changed my lifestyle.
Okay.
So I mean, again, TV doesn't make much money, but it doesn't. After a few seasons, I started making more than the 40 grand a year I was making as a teacher.
Right.
So I was a non-union teacher at a charter school, and it wasn't, with a pretty low-paying job. So, and I just never changed my lifestyle. So I was able to sock away a bunch of money
To put into the museum.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I never took out a loan or anything to make the museum.
Yeah, we didn't either.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought I had lost everything at that point, everything that I had saved up, and I didn't know how I was going to make it happen. But we muddled through with the grace of the Bigfoot community and their kindness, because I just put it out there like, hey, I blew everything I have on this. Can you guys help me through? And they were kind enough to order shirts, and it wasn't enough to pay all the bills.
Sure.
But I had a little bit of money left over, so we muddled through. And now we're being, it's taking care of itself, and
It's paying its own bills.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a good friend of mine, one of the camera guys on Finding Bigfoot, and Dana, he told me you can only make two amounts of money in this world: enough or not enough. And it's true. I live my life by that.
I like that.
I mean, I have enough.
Yeah.
I know of several billionaires that don't. But
Yes.
yet here I am. I have enough. I have a meager little museum that pays my bills, and it gets me in the field, and it gives me the time to do what I love to do. I'm blessed to have enough, and it's something that a lot of people don't have.
Amen to that.
That's not much, but
And
enough.
what
Enough
year
doesn't have
did
to
you actually open?
I think it was October of 2019.
Okay, so we opened ours in 16,
Mhm.
but we opened our store in 13, opened the museum in 16, but I built a Bigfoot replica to begin with, and then I saw yours, and I thought, Cliff has the coolest Bigfoot in the world, and I contacted the same people and had
Yeah,
them
Bo
build
Bruns from Unit 70 Studios.
Unit 70. And so I have to thank you again for that inspiration, because that's been a big hit for us too.
Sure.
They do a fantastic job on their statues. But so how many seasons did you do Finding Bigfoot?
Seasons are made up by the accounting office, so they don't really exist.
Okay.
Something the most like in sitcoms or something. That's a season because they start with in the story.
That's
arc over the
interesting.
whole
I didn't
thing.
know that.
Yeah. In reality TV, seasons are made up by the accounting office, and whenever a new season happens, production gets a raise, and maybe we
Okay.
do too, because we're not production and all that sort of stuff. Because I remember doing season 3D.
3D.
I'm thinking, wait a minute, that seems like a way to pay us less, and it was. That's why they do it. There's probably seasons don't matter; they're invented. It depends who you ask at the end of the
Okay.
day. But I can say that we filmed for 9 years.
9 years.
We started filming in 2010, and we filmed the last thing in 2018, I think, and then we did that reboot in 2020. But so seasons,
Okay.
I don't know. It's a made up convention. Essentially.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
A lot of times we'd go out on a run and we'd film X number
Right.
of episodes, and then we'd find out that one of the episodes that we filmed was actually saved and then tagged on to the next season. So it's really amorphous and invented by
Well,
the
I don't think I know how you actually got involved with Finding Bigfoot. I mean, how did that happen?
Well, I was already Bigfooting for a long time,
Okay.
and I guess I was networking. I don't really consider it that, but I had some friends in the Bigfoot field, etc. And one day I got a call. I remember it was November, I think of 2009. I got a call from this guy saying that, Animal Planet or Discovery owns Animal Planet, so they're the
Okay.
same thing. So we're going to be doing this show, and you're a Bigfooter, would you like to be involved in this somehow? And I had a blog, because blogs were big at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I would report what I was doing on my field work and that sort of thing. I'd done a little bit of TV before, but not much. So I think they just found me through that and through recommendations, because I know they were talking to Moneymaker and Bobo and about a dozen other people in the Bigfoot community. And the guy called, and I said, yeah, sure, sounds like fun. And so he asked me to send in a tape of stuff I was doing. And he then kind of forgot about it. And then, in May, Moneymaker calls me and goes, Cliff, you got the spot. I go, that's great. What are you talking about? And he goes, well, remember that guy? And I go, oh, that was real?
That
He
was
goes, yeah.
real.
And so then we filmed the pilot, and right after school got out that year, because I was a teacher at the time. Went to Alaska, filmed the pilot. They liked what they saw. Then they bought 6 episodes for the first season, and it worked.
Well, what I like is that they looked for researchers. They weren't looking for actors. They wanted people who were doing
Yeah,
research.
the vast majority of reality TV, anything, especially in the paranormal world, they're just actors.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, I think, in a lot of ways, because they actually, from what I was told by one of the Discovery people, that they tried to get actors, but then they quickly realized actors don't know anything,
Right.
and so they couldn't really do it.
Right.
So they hired real Bigfooters, which actually we became a much bigger pain in the ass than they anticipated. Yeah, because they thought we were just going to play ball and do TV stuff.
Sure,
But we
sure.
didn't. They thought we wanted to be on TV, and all of us were thinking, well, we're going to go.
We're gonna find Bigfoot.
No. All of us were saying we're going to go Bigfooting on Animal Planet's dime.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was, and so that we clashed very heavily.
Wow.
For a long time. The first season was very, very rocky. We had a lot of concerns about the production, and certainly the production company had a lot of concerns about us because we weren't playing ball. We wouldn't just say something was
Interesting.
true or say something was a Bigfoot, because they were choosing locations based on, it's going to look great when you guys walk over that log. And
That would have been my concern. In
Oh yeah,
your
it's
place.
a huge concern. Even to this day, I get called by production companies for one-offs or things like
Right.
that all the time. And the first thing I tell them is, I will not toe the party line. I will not lie for your show. And if you want a real Bigfooter and a real Bigfooter's opinion, then we can continue speaking.
Okay.
And I get callbacks less than half the time.
Wow.
That's what TV is, unfortunately.
But good for you, though, Cliff. Good for
Yeah,
you.
I agree.
But it's not just me. It's Matt and Renee and Bobo as well. It's a
Good.
team effort, because if we weren't cohesive on that, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened.
Sure.
The network executives came out to Oregon and flew out to talk to us and make sure that it was a big deal.
I
Almost
remember.
cost the show, and certainly we could have put ourselves in legal jeopardy because of our contract, but we weren't gonna. The subject, the animals, are more important than that.
And I think we've all probably had the experience, if you've done anything on TV, is that they have an agenda that they want you to match.
Yeah, they have a story.
They have a
And,
story,
yeah, production look
and-
for stories. I look for animals in the woods.
Right. And we've certainly had them do an episode of a particular show and then take two of my sentences and put them together
Yeah.
so that I said something I didn't really say.
That's called frankenbiting. They do it
Yeah.
all the time. And for whatever it's worth, all of our producers their reality TV is their living, they walked away saying that our TV show was by far the most real reality show they'd ever worked on. But I think as far as TV goes, it's a pretty okay show. And now I'm so far removed from it now, because it's been so many years since we filmed. I can go back and watch the show, and it doesn't even seem like me on camera. So I can enjoy the show as like a regular consumer.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because my next question is, how did your show, because I think Finding Bigfoot was groundbreaking in so many ways. There was never really a Bigfoot show. Certainly not like, was there?
Yeah, in 2000, 2001, there was Mysterious Encounters. Doug Hychek, as White Wolf production, Doug
Right.
Hychek and Autumn Williams was the host.
But was
And,
it specifically a Sasquatch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of that, but you have to tip the hat to the people that came
Sure.
before us. And Autumn's a great investigator, and she's quiet now, but like back in the day, she was very forefront about everything.
And yet, I would still say Finding Bigfoot was groundbreaking in, I think, changing people's opinions maybe about this topic. What would you say changed as a result of Finding Bigfoot being
Well,
on TV?
there's good things and bad things, certainly. A lot of both. I think as far as the good things go, I think that witnesses realized that they weren't necessarily alone. A lot of people, I'm sure you've spoken to plenty of witnesses, and they have a lot of apprehension about sharing what they've seen and what they've experienced. And I think that the show kind of made it okay, because you could see, yeah, we had some crazy people on the show for sure, but at the same time, we had a lot of very normal, down-to-earth,
Right.
grounded folks, and that just shows you that it doesn't matter what kind of person you are. You can see a Sasquatch. It's not a demographic phenomenon. It's a geographic
Right.
phenomenon. And I think by people seeing the show and saying, well, he teaches school or whatever. Yeah, that guy's a college professor. This guy works at a sanitary plant or whatever. Like, they're seeing regular, normal people having encountered Sasquatches. I think that kind of gave a boost to the idea.
Gave
that,
them validity, I guess.
yeah, not only on a personal level, but also on a larger societal level.
Okay.
It's a little less weird now that somebody could have seen one of these things.
Right.
So.
Well, and I would say Finding Bigfoot went a long way to seeing that happen. I got another question, Sybil, but do you have something you want to ask, Cliff?
Well, when I was working in the museum in Georgia, I can't tell you how many people said that after finding Bigfoot, that's what raised their awareness to the fact that there really are these things out there, and there was a place to report, because most people, like some people were witnesses, but they said, I didn't know where to take my sighting to, and now they had a place, where they could report. So it was a big deal with all the people who came in the museum and talked about it.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly spawned a new generation of Bigfooters
Mhm.
of whatever age, and that's again, that's good and bad. It's a little bit
Right.
of both. Some of the bad is that a new flush of individuals coming into the field. That means they don't know the history of the
Mhm.
subject. They don't know the hoaxers out there. They don't know who to
Mhm.
listen to, and they think that every website is valid. And it's just simply not.
It's
So
not true if it's on the internet.
well, yeah. Well, in general, I mean, I'm very jaded. I'm super skeptical. I really am. I mean,
I get it.
very skeptical, very jaded. I say if it's on any media whatsoever, TV, internet, etc., just don't believe it until you have a reason to.
Yeah,
Like if you know somebody involved, then ask them about it. Like what
sure.
really happened on that thing or whatever. What's actually behind this? Because I see a lot of people coming into the field and realizing I want to be a big fish in this small pond,
Hmm.
and they're out there, they're making their videos, they're doing their this and that. There's podcasts. I have a podcast too. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are just out there screaming, "Look at me! Look at me!" And I feel like I'm one of the only people out there screaming as loud as I can. Look at them.
Look
Look
at
at the
them.
animals. They're the ones that matter here. It's not about the people. And yeah, and I've been called a hypocrite for saying that because I am a high profile Bigfooter. But that's where I find myself.
Hmm.
That's where I find myself, and I'm trying to do something good for the
But you're
subject.
not trying to do that to boost your image. You're trying to get exposure for Bigfoot.
I think that they're an important
Yeah,
species in a lot of ways, and I want them to be celebrated, not me.
a hundred
I'm a
percent.
cog in the wheel. I'm in the machine, man. Like if I can do something good for them, then I'm gonna, because they've given me everything that's important to me in my
Yeah,
life. I met my wife on the show. I met my dog on the show. Most of my friends are Bigfooters. It's given me a way to earn a
it's
meager
true.
but enough living.
It's true.
I want to do something for them.
Now, there's a computer sitting back there at the back of the room, and we have time for one person from the audience. If you have a question for Cliff, I would ask you to walk over to that computer and ask it in just a second. I have one more question, and then if anyone would like to, that's fine. If not, so in all the years that you were filming Finding Bigfoot, you guys were in a lot of locations, a lot of states, a lot of woods at night. Did you ever have an encounter? I mean, I would just ask it for you, not for the rest of the cast, but an encounter where you were particularly concerned or frightened by what happened in that, and could you tell us about it?
No,
Really?
no, because you may see me out there alone, but I'm not alone. Otherwise, you wouldn't see me. The guy's holding a camera.
Sure.
Right? And a lot of people forget about that because they get swept up in the talent thing. But if Bobo and I are in a night investigation, it's Bobo and I and a camera guy and a producer, maybe a there's 5 of us out there,
Yeah.
so there's really no reason to be afraid. And of course, the camping segments. There's Tyler Bounds was usually the guy filming us. Sometimes other Craig Flippy filmed us, of course, and other people. But there's always at least one other person out there. And I'm in the
It's a good
woods
point.
a lot. I even now I'm going 1 to 3 days a week. I
Hmm.
usually go alone. And so when you're alone, and let's say there's a mountain lion nearby, or I've seen plenty of
Sure.
bears up close and that kind of thing, you have to be careful. So if I'm alone, I'm cautious and a little on edge sometimes.
Hmm.
But if I'm with one other person,
Sure.
there's nothing to be worried about at all.
And would you say you've have you ever had Bigfoot show any aggression towards you at any
I've been
time?
screamed at and I've
Okay.
been had things
Sure.
thrown at me and stuff, but they're just pouting.
Yeah,
Who cares?
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a question. Leah, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by their eye shine. And sometimes it's green and then sometimes it's red. Most of the time I've seen eye shine, it's green. What do you think about eye shine?
Good question.
Well, there's a lot to think about ice shine. In fact, I wrote an article about it back in the day as well. There's some possibilities that one needs to look at. There's only one primate in the world. It's some sort of tarsier that has what's called a tapetum lucidum. It's a reflective layer on the back of the eye, and nocturnal animals tend to have that. What happens is that light comes in, and then usually, like in humans who don't have a tapetum lucidum, the light comes in and stimulates the retina. The retina sends the signal to the brain. The brain interprets the impulse, as what we see, right? But what happens with nocturnal animals like dogs and goats and deer and all that sort of stuff, the light comes in and it's reflected by the tapetum lucidum. The tapetum lucidum is Latin for something like shiny carpet or something like that. And it sends the light back through the retina again. So basically another opportunity for the retina to pick up that light and interpret it essentially to your brain, or send it to the brain to be interpreted. Now, there's only one primate some sort of tarsier has that sort of thing, but no great ape species does. And clearly Sasquatches are some sort of great ape,
Nor do we, correct?
No, nor do we. And we are also great apes, whatever that's worth. We are also hominids. That is our biological family. I always speak about Sasquatches in biological terms out of respect for the animals themselves. So maybe they do have a tapetum lucidum, possibly. I've spoken to witnesses who had seen eye shine on Sasquatches, and they have reflected back different colors. And upon further investigation in those particular cases, every time they saw the eye shine, there was a different light source.
Okay.
Halogen versus LED versus incandescent or something like that. So that may have something to do with a differentiation in color. We don't know. As far as the red eye shine, which is by far the most common color, that could be explained by the size of their eyes. I think that would satisfy the phenomenon. I think, and I think it's anything paranormal or anything like that at all in any way. See, humans, when you imagine like Christmas time, you take pictures, you open presents or whatever. Your eyes sometimes shine back red if there's a flash, right? And what that is, that red is the blood on your retina and it reflects back to the camera. Okay, you're seeing the blood in the back of your eye, essentially, is what that red is. Now, keep that in mind for a minute. Now, most eyewitness reports of Sasquatches, when there's a very, very close encounter, very close, they almost never notice the sclera, which is the white part of the eye. Okay.
Right.
Now, that could be because ape species like chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans, often, not always, but oftentimes have a colored sclera, a brown sclera. Right. But there's another possibility as well with Sasquatches. It could be that the iris, the colored part of their eye, takes up the entire opening part. It's just such a big iris. Now, the iris is a muscle. It's a muscle, and that muscle is used for opening and closing the lens and focusing your eyes, focusing the lens on your eyes. But it's basically to increase the aperture of your lens or decrease the aperture according to how much light there is. So if their eyes are bigger than ours anyway because their heads are bigger than ours anyway. So if they have a larger than human eye and they have a disproportionately larger iris, that suggests a larger pupillary opening. So under the darkest of dark conditions, it's like having a larger telescope because that larger telescope gathers more light in. So in the darkest of dark conditions, if their aperture opens significantly larger, and it would be by a function of a square, I believe, because it's not a linear thing, it's an area thing. So it'd be a function of a square, an exponentially larger area. It would gather a lot more light, and it could be just faintly reflecting on the blood vessels in the back of the iris, or the back of the retina, rather, just like in your Christmas pictures. But in the darkest of dark conditions, it may seem like it's a lot brighter. And also, owls, for example, have eyes that are a completely different shape. They're not spherical like humans are. They're more like a Coke can. They're more like a cylinder. And the different shape of their eyes actually allows them to gather more light and see in low light conditions. It's possible something like that is going on with the Sasquatch as well. That's all speculation, of course, but there's several very normal biological, down-to-earth reasons why Sasquatches would have some sort of eye shine.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
that's our time for our part with you. So thank you very much. Would you grab Mireya as you go out?
I'll do my best.
Have her come in.
All right.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you,
Nice to see
Cliff. All right.
Well,
Hello.
we're with Mireya Major. This is Sibylla Irwin. I don't know if you've ever met
We
Sibylla.
have not.
Nice to meet you.
You.
Sibylla's in Texas, and we do this podcast together. And we're just excited that you give us a little bit of time.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
my pleasure.
I was appreciated that Kevin made it possible to actually interview each one of you for a few minutes. But for those who don't know Mireya is one of the co-hosts of Expedition Bigfoot, along with Russ, who we're going to interview next. But you've got a very varied background. I was doing a little bit of research on you from, NFL cheerleader to primatologist to National Geographic explorer to I don't know what else. I mean, to be honest, but
Mom of six.
mom of six,
Executive
really?
director at a university.
Oh my goodness.
I wear a
Wow.
lot of hats.
Mom of six of how old are your six?
Youngest is 9, oldest is
My
19.
goodness. Yeah, you've got a full-time job there
No,
alone.
no kidding.
And how many years have you been doing Expedition Bigfoot now?
We are coming on 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, of working together.
Does that surprise you? Did you expect it would go 6 years in the
No,
beginning? Okay.
not at all. In fact, I took the job thinking it would be gone in a year, if I'm honest.
It will be gone in a year.
And then they, they hooked me. Apparently they hooked an audience and we're still at it and loving it. And we've all become like a
Hmm.
family, crew, team, all of us. We get out there and work hard, but have fun together, take care of each other. And we're just really enjoying it. Not to mention finding stuff that keeps us
Uh-huh.
wanting to get back out and get back out. And every season, I feel like there's more answers and more questions and more of a motivator to keep
Sure.
exploring.
And that's one of the questions I want to ask you in a second here. But um, I've heard people refer to you as a female Indiana Jones. What do you think about that?
The New York Times nicknamed me that about 2 decades ago, and it has stuck on every headline and every. I mean, I think
Do you see yourself at all in that
well, I mean,
role,
I
or
think the comparison, of course, is I do wear an Indiana Jones style hat on my expeditions, and I'm out there, and there are similarities. But what's funny is I actually had dinner with Harrison Ford one night.
did you really? Oh
And
wow.
I said, you know what, for just one night, you're going to be the male Dr. Mireya Mayer because it's only fair. So
Sure. Well, that was a real privilege to have dinner with him. So in 6 years of doing this show, and you guys have been to lots of locations, you've
Mhm.
used lots of really cool equipment.
yeah.
What would you say is the most compelling evidence, in your opinion, that you guys have uncovered?
And it's funny, I have a hard time calling it evidence
Okay.
because I need it to be irrefutable
Hmm.
and acceptable
fair.
into the science books. But however, um, I think that some of the findings that we've had are really incredible. Some of them have made me lose sleep for weeks. Some of them
Hmm.
definitely have made me raise an eyebrow or two. I think the most compelling find we've had was the DNA in Kentucky underneath the what Bigfoot researchers call a tree structure, right? I thought that was incredibly compelling.
In
And then
what
of
form
course
was
the
it?
nest.
Hair or
No, eDNA.
eDNA?
So
Okay.
from the dirt and also the nest that we found this last season. I thought I mean, that was one of the truly most shocking moments I've had in the field with this team.
What state were you in when you found that?
Washington State,
Okay.
although we have also found them in Northern California, but the ones in Washington State were remarkable.
Because people ask me that all the time in Colorado. I've never found a nest. The only ones I ever heard about were in Washington. So, um, but it's, did you ever find them in Kentucky when you were there, Sibylla, or in Tennessee, any kind of nest?
Yes, I found some areas that it definitely looked like something had cleared, like almost like raked all of the leaves and everything to like down to bare, and then would lay down into that spot. I would find multiple sites like that just down from the berm where, all the feeding station had been.
And I mentioned the equipment. I mean, you guys have used equipment that I would only dream of using because of the cost and everything. What's the most interesting equipment that you guys have tried?
Oh my goodness, there's been so much. I think what's really exciting about the equipment that we've had really the privilege of using out there is that a lot of it is so cutting edge
Mhm.
that it's military grade and it hasn't even been deployed into the military yet. Like we get to test it out
Wow.
and then it goes into, so I mean, some of the stuff that we've had has just been sort of mind blowing. And with the drones being able to hone in on thermals and movement and literally just zip right over to where it perceives this, that to us is it's like it makes our research possible because the land is so vast and our
Mhm.
time is limited like any other expedition. So having that capability at our disposal is sort of the game changer.
Now, I think Russ told me last year when he was here that you guys will go out and do like a month of
Yes.
recording at a time. Okay. In more than one location usually? Or-
No, usually we're at least a month in one
Okay.
location before we move to another location.
Which I can appreciate because some of the frustration people have expressed in other Bigfoot shows is they just went from place to place to place
Right.
every episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's
And-
something to be said for kind of embedding yourself in an area as long as you can. You're definitely gonna get a lot more if you're there a month, rather if you're there, 4 to 5 days. And you start to perceive changes in the environment. You start to notice little things that actually are really important once you're in an area. And also animals get used
Get
to
used
your
to you.
presence there, and that also could invoke some kind of
Sure.
behavior and curiosity and more interaction.
And you get to know what's normal sounds for that
Exactly.
area at night. And so,
Yeah.
and on the show, it appears that when you're out there, you're just with the cameraman. Is that who it is usually?
So it's myself and Biko this last season, and then we each have a cameraman. And then this season, for the first time, we had someone with sound, because sound is
Okay.
such an important element to what we're trying to
That's interesting.
record and share with audiences. And it was an issue. You get a lot of technical issues, especially in those environments. So having someone that is just dedicated to sound, that to make sure that we capture, like sometimes we'll hear something and I'll ask the cameraman, did you hear that? But they're wearing
Right.
headphones to hear us, so they may not have heard it. Having someone who is only tuned in to the sound was
And who will
was
hear
amazing.
more than you do, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, because they've got that boom going. Yeah.
I didn't know that you had a sound person.
This is the
that's really
first
good.
time ever that
Yeah.
we did, and I hope it stays
Yeah.
because it was really
That's
helpful.
awesome.
The last year I interviewed Ronnie when he was here, and he mentioned the time when you and he. I asked him what was the strangest thing that he had had happen.
I know what he's going to say.
The cliff face and
Yeah, the
the shadow.
shadow.
What would you? How would you? For those who don't know what happened, just describe quickly what happened in that situation that was kind of bizarre.
And this is one of the most common questions that I get asked
Yeah.
about that scene, and I'll talk about it later today in my talk
Okay.
at 1 o'clock. Basically, we're standing at a river's edge, and there's a cliff face in front of us, and he and I spotted at the very same time. We had the same reaction, something that looked like, well, first of all, a shadow,
Mm-hmm.
but that looked like that that iconic image of a
Of the-
Bigfoot with the conical
Right.
head and that
Yeah.
and that walk. And it just came across the rock face. And the cameraman didn't know why we were reacting the way we were. They didn't see it. They were focused in on us.
Was it the light of the camera?
No,
Okay.
it was not. Well, it doesn't even matter because there has to be something there
Right.
to cast that shadow. Obviously lights involved because
Sure.
that's the only way you would get a shadow, but it was, there was nowhere for it to come from even at that angle, the river, everything else. And then it just suddenly vanished. And, it was about a week later, we convinced the camera folks to take a look and review the footage, that they said, oh my God, and it kept them up all night because they couldn't figure out what they were looking at.
Now, did you see a Sasquatch that night up on that bluff?
Ronnie says that he saw
Okay.
something up on that ridge.
Because
I
something
did
seemed to be
not.
kicking rocks down.
There was a lot of
Okay.
activity where rocks were coming down for
Okay.
sure.
Before,
And that's why we were standing there. That's why
yeah,
we were, like,
exactly.
hanging out.
It attracted your attention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Before I ask, I'm going to give you a chance to ask a question, Sibylla, but for those here watching in the audience, just before we end, I'm going to give someone a chance to ask Mireya a question at that computer over there. So be thinking about a question you want to ask, and if you want to move that way before we get done, I'll give you a chance to ask a question. So, Sibylla, do you have anything you want to ask Mireya?
Well, it sounds like you guys have a real potential to discover some incredible evidence. Do you think that it would be the end of your show or just the beginning of
Yeah,
your
that
show
was-
if that
Oh, no.
happened?
It's so funny. I hear that all the time, like, oh, well, that would be the end. I'm like, are you kidding? That would be the beginning. If
That's
you
what I think.
now have that physical, irrefutable evidence and you capture it on film, why would you stop there? Like now there's a million more questions
Sure.
to go after. And are these
Yeah.
animals animals, do they live in family groups? Are they solitary? What do they really eat? Like, can you capture some of this behavior? That to me would open up a million more opportunities for filming, not the end at all.
And would you continue? Would you continue your
I
work?
think more than ever, I would
More
want to
than ever.
continue that work because I mean, I've dedicated my life to studying animals, primates that were on the verge of extinction, that had never been studied before, and that had never even been photographed in many cases. And
Okay.
so it's kind of a very natural fit into what I do.
Yeah.
If we were able to prove the existence, I mean, like absolutely prove, to continue on and to learn more about it.
Do you think it's going to take a body? Uh,
Well, as long as you don't mean a dead body, because that's somewhere where it traditionally, right?
yeah.
There was always a specimen stuffed in a museum, and you'd
Yes.
have two actually, a male and a female. Things have changed. Like I've made primate discoveries, and I will not provide a body
Right.
for a museum, but I will provide all the evidence you need for the two type specimens so that when they die, then they go into a museum because you absolutely must have that, but not kill something in
Right.
order to have that because that just is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just wrong. I would never do that for the sake of
Well,
science or anything.
well, thank you for saying that. I feel the same way. Yeah.
I do too.
Of course.
Hopefully nobody brings a body that they've shot for that
Oh,
reason.
no.
I mean, we've all heard stories about Sasquatch being hit by semi trucks or whatever, but we still don't have a body even after that. So it's kind of interesting if those stories are true that these things just the body disappears,
Right.
so to speak. So, what do you think? Okay, I would say historically, we've been doing Bigfoot research maybe 75 years if you go all the way back to the earliest researchers. And we know what they thought and we kind of know where things are now. What do you think is the future of Bigfoot research?
I mean, I think the best way that we're going to collect evidence is boots on the ground. You know, you have to be out there in the field. Obviously the technology, I mean, it's funny because I'm very old school about expeditions. So I didn't have a lot of technology on my expeditions, and I really because I believe so firmly on just the boots on the ground. However, there is a part of me that sees the advantage of that because what we need is to be able to prove this. Now, I hesitate in what I was about to say because we need the photographs, we need the video, but that's never going to be enough, especially in this age where there's AI. No one is going to believe it.
No, it's
Truth.
true.
So I love the ability to do that, and I do think that it's necessary, but it can't be the only evidence that you provide. So that's why I continue to say the boots on the ground, being able to collect physical evidence and also observational evidence. Like if you see something and then you go to that spot and there's prints and there's a hair sample and there's all these, you know, all of these things matter, and now you have multiple lines of evidence. And so you can't do that with a drone or anything else. I mean, it could capture stuff, but then people will question it, and rightly so, because you could pretty much recreate anything now.
Which, I don't know how they handle that in courts anymore because you can't use photographic evidence.
Right.
AI can do anything. But and I think there's far more evidence that's already out there from the past 75 years of tracks of hair, of sightings, of thousands upon thousands of eyewitness testimony. And as we said earlier, it could mean that there needs to be a body. But you mentioned DNA earlier that you guys found. Did you do a full analysis on the DNA at the time?
So with eDNA, it's a little bit tricky because it's the type of DNA you collect that is most degraded because it's exposed to the environment. You know, when I have an animal in front of me and I can collect blood, that DNA is going
Sure.
to be gold, right? When you're collecting eDNA, it's a little bit trickier.
It's basically traces of that
Right.
animal that are left in the environment.
Right. So every living animal sheds DNA as they walk. We all do. And it's no different in the forest with the animals there. So we're always looking to exclude, right? You know, not this, not that. But when it came down to showing what it was, the interesting part is that it came out part chimpanzee.
Hmm.
Now there's possible explanations for that you can't ignore, like someone had a pet chimp and it escaped, or someone walked their pet chimp through the woods. It sounds nuts, but it happens. However, I went back to that area. I spoke to the town. I did some research. It doesn't appear to have been
Right.
the case, but you don't know. But it's really intriguing nonetheless because we are so closely related to chimpanzees. I mean, 99% genetically related. So the fact that we found that there where there should be no chimpanzee DNA, it's interesting.
What else did the DNA show besides chimpanzee?
Well, human and then inconclusive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Similar to other DNA
Yes,
tests that have been done in the past.
exactly.
Which is frustrating in a way because it's the unknown part that we want to know,
Correct.
and we can't get that.
And I think until we sort of can source the DNA and, really know the source,
Right.
it's going to be pretty tricky.
I agree with that. Do you feel that, well, tell me a little bit about your research aside from Expedition Bigfoot. Do you have the opportunity and the time to do your own field work?
Oh, yeah, that comes really first and foremost
Okay.
for me because I work with such critically endangered animals that we we don't have the luxury of time with them. We need to find ways to protect them. In many cases, prove that they're out there, find out what their numbers are, find out what the needs are, find out what the needs of the people are living in those areas, and really create a plan for protection. And in many cases, like I said, it's even photographing the animal, showing that they're still out there, and then continuing the work, collecting the genetics, the DNA. There's been many times where we've thought it's a subspecies, and then with the DNA collection, I've been able to show that it's actually a full species, which gets them higher protection and conservation
A full
priority.
different species.
Correct.
Okay. Um, do you, what kind of DNA do you think it's going to require? Are we going to need actual blood, or are we going to need?
Well, it can come in any form. It could come from hair, from blood is great, but it could come in any form as long as we're able to attribute it to something that we don't already have in the
Okay.
record, right? Something new.
Sure. And I think the unknown part of any DNA analysis, if it seems to be Sasquatch, is what I think causes the scientific community to take a step back and say, okay, this is really weird because
Right.
every species is in the DNA database, and so that we know of, those that we know of. And you've been involved in discovering new species of lemur, is that right?
Yeah, it's
okay.
a world's smallest primate in Madagascar.
Wow. Now, what, in your opinion, what do you think Sasquatch is? With the evidence that we have and the research we've done, would you say they're, as many people would say, they're America's or the world's great undiscovered great ape? Or are they different than that? Or
I mean, I'd have to guess and speculate, right? So all I could base it on is eyewitness reports, which are really important. And there's a real mix of what people describe as really sounding like a great ape and what really sounds like perhaps a distant hominid relative, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of what seem like human characteristics, which we could attribute to great apes as well, really. If you've ever, made eye contact with a gorilla or a chimp at a zoo, they're not like looking through you, they're looking at you and thinking, and there's a lot of this sort of human thought process, or at least how we perceive it as human thought process happening. So if you're dealing with something that is described as super intelligent, clearly intelligent enough to remain
Right.
very hidden, and perhaps even bury their dead, and who
Right.
knows, you're talking about something. I mean, we're all primates. So whether it's great ape, more human,
sure.
no idea.
Because I've done a little research on great apes, and a round figure is in around the world today, there are 9,000 species of gorilla, orangutans, chimpanzees in captivity. And we've had them in captivity for probably 100 years. And I grew up in Africa. My two brothers had the opportunity to go to Rwanda to go visit the mountain gorillas. and we can go visit them because we know where they are.
Mhm.
And there are people researching them, they're with them. And yet, all these years of research, we've never been able to. The dilemma I find myself in is if Sasquatch is simply a great ape, we would have them in captivity. That's the way humans are. We're going to capture anything that we can capture that we find interesting or fascinating.
Although mountain gorillas are not in captivity. So the
That's
only,
true. Lowland gorillas, but not
only the
mountain.
Western lowland gorillas,
Is that because mountain gorillas,
they wouldn't survive
they wouldn't
captivity.
survive?
Their diet is a little too complex.
I didn't know that. That's an interesting point.
So and same thing with a lot of the lemur species, they cannot be held in captivity. So, I really do think times are changing. I know that humans, they sort of exploit animals and consider them sort of less than human. And so they're not, my whole thing is animals aren't meant for our entertainment purposes. They're living beings and
put
they
in a
have
zoo
rights
and
and
to admire,
absolutely. So zoos definitely serve a purpose insofar
Sure.
as education and all the good work that they do for their wild counterparts. But there are certain animals that should not be in captivity.
I agree, and probably many animals that
Yeah.
shouldn't be in captivity.
Yeah.
And again, it's for our interest and our entertainment in a way. And there are some zoos that are exceptional in how they're
Yeah.
treating those animals, but it's very sad, most cases in zoos. And I certainly would hate to think of a Bigfoot. I've actually heard it said that when pygmies were first discovered, that they were thought to be a primate. And the first pygmies who were actually captured in some way were kept in a cage until it became apparent that they weren't a monkey.
That's
they were.
horrific. I don't even want to talk about that. That's
So
horrible.
it is
These are,
horrible.
they're
It's
humans
horrible.
that I've spent a lot of time with, and yeah, that's awful.
So yeah, they are just as human as we are. So if you put a pygmy next to a 7-foot Scandinavian, you might think they're from different planets, but they're equally human in every respect. And so I've often wondered if Sasquatch could be considered the same way, just a much hairier, more muscular version of us, just as a pygmy is a smaller, darker version of us. And so only time will tell if we ever have the opportunity to have a live Sasquatch. And I'm sure you've heard the stories. We've all heard the stories about people who have had some kind of a relationship with a family of Sasquatch over time. And for different reasons, either in those stories, typically they don't want people to know where they are because they don't want them to be exploited. But where they could even rudimentarily communicate with Sasquatch. Do you think that's possible? And I mean, you've been doing this a long time. So have you ever heard stories of people who've actually learned to speak the language where they could actually communicate with a Sasquatch?
I mean, I've heard stories of people saying that they've experienced something like, let's say, like mind speak or
Right.
telepathy and that sort of thing.
Which is another whole topic that we
Yeah.
don't even have time to get into. So, well, I want to respect the time that we said we would have with you. So that time is up. Is there one question from somebody? If not, I'm going to let Mireya get back to her responsibilities outside. Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thanks so
Really
much.
appreciate you coming and being so eager to answer our questions.
Hi, Russ.
How are you?
I'm
Did
good. How are you?
Well, this is Russell Acord. For those who don't know Russ, he's one of the co-hosts on Expedition Bigfoot, and we just talked with Mireya for a few minutes. Did you ever hear about the Erickson project in Kentucky, the habituation project that went on for about five years first, and then another 5 years? They got a bunch of footage. The sleeping Sasquatch was one of them that's been out there for eons.
How the heck could I miss that? No,
And-
I don't know. I've
okay.
not heard about it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Wow.
Sibylla lived on that property
Okay.
the second period of
The
5
second
years.
5 years. Yeah.
Second 5
Yeah.
years. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking up because they got let me just restart.
That's terrible. I get to meet you and have an even harder your work. That's great.
Well,
Very
I'm
good.
also a witness sketch artist, so you may
Okay.
from time to time have seen some of the artwork I do for witnesses.
Okay. Okay.
which ends up being a therapy for a lot of these people who have been traumatized by their experience. And
Yeah.
she gives them, credibility and a listening ear. And I don't even know how many you've drawn now, how many Sasquatch you've drawn. But,
I have never counted, but it's a whole lot.
so
It gives some people closure, because now the image is out of their head and then they can turn it around and show people this is what I saw. This is why I no longer hunt or fish or camp.
Yeah, that's important. I like that though.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So Russ, you're former U.S. Army, correct?
Yes.
And you're a survivalist, you're an author, now co-host on Expedition Bigfoot. I'm sure there's many other things that I could say. But what I appreciate about your perspective is that you really seem to be wanting to be boots on the ground, doing research on the ground. Um, on the show, the persona that they give to you anyway is you're the guy they're going to send out to the the worst place. It's like, here's this co-host and this co-host. Russ, he's over here on this cliff face or in this cave or, but I would love to know in the 6 years, right, that you've done. Okay, in the 6 years that you guys have been doing this, what's the most significant thing that you personally found that you could point back to? I know the team has found different things, but
Right. The coming across the circles on the forest floor, and then later on finding them close to a tree structure, taking blood off the ground after a significant interaction between two creatures in the forest at night was pretty impressive.
were you near that
Yeah,
interaction?
I actually heard that's what got me and drew me to that area. I heard something going on. I don't know if you've ever heard, if you pick up a great big giant piece of wood, like a log or a stump, and you throw it down on the forest floor, there's a sound of that impact colliding with the earth. And there's no sound like it. And I heard that sound several times before I started hearing branches and
So do you think it was the impact of a body on the
it-
ground, or
that's the only thing I could think of.
what do you think it was?
I think it was a dispute between two creatures
Okay.
that were bent on destroying each other. There was enough blood around. There was an impalement on one of the pieces of wood that was sticking out. It was literally
Had blood on it like it
had
was.
on it like it was an impalement.
Wow.
And then the other, there was some blood on a tree, and it had run down the tree.
Wow.
So we're not talking just a little drop of blood. At that point, that's where I just started following the trail outward.
And were there vocalizations also, Russ?
Yeah.
That's the thing. It was dead silent. There was no verbal or audio vocalization whatsoever. It was just, I mean, I did competitive karate for a while, and I was one of the ones I don't make noise. I've always been very, very quiet about it. That was what caught my attention about that is because it was silent. Everything was silent. There was no growling, screaming.
But you
none
could
of
hear
that.
blows and
Oh my
impact.
gosh. Yeah, it was a brutal.
Well, and to draw that much blood, yeah,
yeah.
that was a serious conflict. It's interesting that there was no body at the end of all that. How long did that last? That
That
conflict?
interaction,
Yeah.
I'd say 60 seconds or less.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then they were moving out. I think my approach is what triggered that, we don't want to be seen here. We don't want to be,
It's a good thing you didn't land in the middle of that conflict.
Hopefully, if I did, the cameraman would have gotten some really great footage. This is Russ
Yes.
getting his arm pulled off.
Yeah, really.
Russ, what got you started in all of this? I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
In the 70s, my parents took us to the theater, and we watched that Patterson Gimlin film that was that actually in a theater. And then, incidentally, it's kind of funny. About 12, 15 years ago, I met Bob Gimlin, and I became his manager.
Oh, I did hear that. Yeah.
We've done a lot of stuff together. I still call him and talk to him periodically.
So you would
Now-
take him around to speaking engagements and things?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd take him through. And he's, even now, he's 93 years old. He's still sharp. He physically, I mean, you figure the the life he put himself through as a cowboy, as a boxer in the Navy, as just a hard-working man. 93 years will impact any human body. So he can't get around like he used to, but he's still sharp.
He's
Yeah.
never changed his story in all
No,
these
not
years.
one bit. And I've sat quiet as I could, and then I get a little frustrated when, if I'm sitting here and somebody walks up and says, "Hey, Bob, I'll give you $1 million. I have $1 million if you tell the truth." He said, "Well, then just give me the money because you've heard it."
Yeah.
People want him to waver in, what he saw.
To make his confession.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what Bob Gimlin saw is what you've heard.
Yeah.
He saw what he saw that day.
I feel the same way, 100%. I believe him 100%. Yep. Salt of the earth.
He's very salt of the earth, and he's never changed his story. When someone is lying, they inevitably change their story over time, and
Yeah.
he never has. And he's been in the public all this time telling the story.
A long
So,
time, you bet.
Yeah. So you saw the Patterson footage, and obviously it impacted you. Same thing with me. When did you start actively, though, boots on the ground researching?
2 days after I got back from the theater.
Seriously?
how
No,
old were you at that point?
That means I have to say come on now.
I didn't know they put that in the theater, to be honest.
I was 8 years old.
Okay.
8 years old when I
Wow.
started. I was born in 65. I was 8 years old. And seeing that, it was like, I had always, my dad always had us in the mountains. We always lived in the woods and from, snakes and squirrels, whatever. But coming home from that theater, there was a whole new world for me to see. I'd been all over that forest, but I thought if I'm sharing the forest with something like this, I gotta see it for myself. And that was my obsession. I've never been able to stop.
I had the same impression when I watched it the first time, and I thought, monsters are real. As a kid, that's what my response was.
Yeah.
Monsters are real, and that's one right there. And
Yeah.
I didn't look at it, it's weird. I didn't think of it as a monster because the one thing that, even as a kid, watching that thing, if something is aggressive to you, it's going to approach you and want to do damage to you.
Right.
What we saw in the footage was casual, calm, walking away, not a care in the world.
which is the most common way people interact with them.
Yep.
is
Yep.
them walking away. And
Yeah.
so,
I wish one would come and shake my hand.
yeah, don't you? Well, here's may sound like a stupid question, but if you could ask Bigfoot one question, what question would you ask them?
Ah, that's a really good question. I wouldn't want to ask why they want to be so hidden,
Okay.
because look around you. I mean,
Sure.
what we do,
Look around at what humans do.
what we do. I mean, I wouldn't want to, honestly, if I was at peace in the forest, had everything I needed, and there was nothing that I had to have, why would I want to go outside that perimeter and look for something or ask, humans who seems to destroy and eat up everything that comes in their path? I don't know. That's a really good question,
Because if they do have a language like we believe they do,
Yeah.
logically, it would be possible to ask them a question at some point. But I've thought about that myself, and I don't know what question I would ask. It might have to do with some of the things we find with tree structures, and why do you do this?
Yeah.
Why do you make these trees the way you do? And
Maybe a good question to ask would be, are they similar to us? Do they bury
Right.
their dead?
right,
Do they respect that?
which would account for
Never been able
no
to find it.
bodies. And just as we wouldn't leave our brother or friend in the woods if
Oh,
they
never.
died, we would take care of them. So, yeah. And that's a question we get asked a lot, I'm sure, as you do, is where is there no body? Why is there no captured one? Or
That's super simple. We have mountain lion problems in Utah. I mean, we know there's a plethora of mountain lions all over the place. And I've been in the woods. I've spent my life in the woods. I'm getting up there in age, and I'm not going to stop. But I've yet to come across a mountain lion carcass. Not once.
I have never found a mountain lion carcass.
And
I found one bear carcass.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never found a bear carcass.
Yeah, most hunters never have.
Yeah.
So, and we know how many thousands of bears and mountain lions there are.
Yeah.
So I guess nature is very efficient. and taking care of that.
I would think a mountain lion, if it knows it's going to die, it's going to crawl into the
Mhm.
tightest corner of a cave and just let nature take its course.
Has your thoughts or ideas of what they were or are changed from when the beginning of when you started studying to where you are now?
Not having a lot to base an opinion on or not knowing, when I very first started, I always thought they were an animal. You always think you're covered in fur, you got to be an animal, right?
Sure.
But over the last couple decades, I'm seeing that their behavior, their patterns, their everything that I find is very much like human.
Mhm.
They're very
They're communal and they're apparently in their living situation.
they communicate, they are
communicate.
intelligent. They only they are very, very much like humans.
Mhm.
The animal thing doesn't seem to fit anymore.
No.
And their level of intelligence to evade us and the camera traps and
Yeah.
The camera traps is that I'm glad you brought that up because um, if you walk in your house and somebody got into your house ahead of you and is cooking bacon, as soon as you step in the house, what do you smell? Okay, out in the forest, there's no smells but just pine needles and wet
Right.
dirt and pine sap and water and the moisture. And that smell becomes your backdrop to a painting, okay? So your backdrop is this pure white thing. As soon as something of color hits it, like a smell in the forest, something different,
Hmm.
you're going to notice it. And I have a very sensitive nose. I can smell plastic and metal, and I smell things I shouldn't smell. It's been insane. Um,
But especially, I'm sure, when you're in the woods for an extended period, you smell something that doesn't seem normal
it's usually
in
me.
that environment.
No, the sense of smell. So what's to say of any
Yeah.
creature, deer, elk, bear, it doesn't matter. They're going to smell fresh, clean plastic because it doesn't belong there. They're gonna hear the trigger of a single lens reflex on a camera. We don't know. We've never dissected an eye of a Bigfoot. We don't know what they can see. Can they see the eye or light?
Right.
How they get along at night in darkness. I can't. I have to
right,
use a flashlight, and I get
right,
harassed for using a flashlight.
Sure.
But I'm going to use a flashlight because I'm not going to step off a cliff for anybody.
And
yeah.
why do
Yeah.
they avoid the IR cameras, but they don't care about an audio recorder? I've never seen them destroy or take an audio recorder, and I've had them walk around them, make noises. Never
Yeah.
can catch them on camera, ever.
Yeah, I've had difficulty with the cameras, but why wouldn't they smell the plastic of an audio recorder?
You would think that it would be the same smell. That's
Yep.
that's the confusing part. Is it the infrared that they're opposed to, or but have you guys ever had equipment destroyed when you've been out there
Oh, yeah.
filming? Okay.
Yeah. My camera, my trail camera, got destroyed in Kentucky. The thing is, I spent enough time in the military walking around with night vision goggles. If somebody has an IR light, it looks like a beacon out there. It's
Yeah.
just a
Right.
spotlight. You're like, oh yeah, you're not doing a very good job of hiding. I can see you 8 miles away.
Sure.
So maybe that's it. Maybe they see that.
They see in a different spectrum than we do, but
Yeah.
yeah, their level of intelligence. Sibylla and I often talk about how they're not just adept at hiding. There's more to it than that. I think they demonstrate in how they interact with us, um, and how they evade. People have often asked me this, and I'd love to know, since you know Bob so well, why was Bob and Roger able to get that video when nobody since then? I mean, there's bits, clips, and things of Sasquatch, but nothing even comes close to the PG. Why do you think that is?
I have a theory. If you want to hear it real
God
quick.
left it.
Okay. You're Bigfoot. You're in the forest. The only other things in the woods that you hear around you, aside from humans make that big bipedal, clumpy boots, always coughing and hacking and everything else that humans do with their clothes, and that all makes a separate noise. But anything bipedal is going to be them, which they understand. I would know that if you were coming in the house with your cowboy boots on, right?
Right.
Everything else in the forest has 4 legs. Horses,
It sounds different. Yeah.
deer, elk, bear,
Yeah.
4 legs. So they were on horseback. So it probably wouldn't have alerted anybody. Oh, I hear the clump, 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 clump of hoof prints coming. Is it a deer? Is it an elk? I could care less because I'm not worried about it. But these guys were on horses, and I think that was the only advantage they had at that moment, was that they didn't raise any awareness because of the noise of the bipedal or
Yeah.
Yeah,
down on the river bottom. There could have been. I mean, you're talking running water makes a background noise.
Yeah.
You can mask a lot.
True.
well, I have a theory. I'm curious to know what you think, and I guess it comes back to whether they can see in the IR spectrum or not. But my theory is the only video evidence we're ever going to get of Sasquatch is if we go backwards in technology, not forwards, because all of our technology now emits something, emits sound, it emits infrared, whatever the case may be. Roger's camera was a wind up 16 millimeter camera.
I have one just like it.
Yeah. And I have an 8 millimeter. It's the same way. It emits nothing. It's completely passive. It's taking in light until it winds
Just
down.
sound.
Then you wind it back up again. And Patty didn't seem particularly bothered by the equipment. I mean, she was probably bothered by them and the fact that Roger ran towards her with the camera. But, and had her behavior been different towards them in that one instance, it could have changed everything in terms of Bigfoot research.
Yeah.
If she had attacked them, for instance, or so. And I've heard, and maybe you could confirm this. I've met Bob, but I've never had a chance to chat with Bob. That Roger actually kind of halfway got bucked off the horse when his horse saw the Sasquatch.
Right.
It reacted. So he had to kind of recover, get the camera out of the bag, and
Yeah, it was a bit of a rodeo there for a second because the horse did react to it a bit, but then he was trying to get steady and trying
right.
to, keep pace with it. Get up
Did he
next
fall
to it.
down at one point when he was?
He never said that he fell
Okay.
down. I don't recall him ever saying that. I just know that it was hectic trying to keep the horse from getting away, and the horse
Yeah.
run off and left him. So, if you're miles away and your one
Yeah.
mode of transportation bolts on you, you're thinking, "Oh, great."
Now you gotta
Bob,
go
I
find
really
the
count
horse.
on you, Bob. You better
Yeah.
stick around. But you know what? You just made a really good point. We've always said, with all the technology we have, look at that great cell phone you have. I can look up anything I want to.
Right.
I can talk to you across the planet, and you can see my face as I speak to you. And we think all this great technology, we should have something by now.
Right.
But the higher the technology goes, the worse we get at it. Because we count on that. We count on all these other interferences or these devices that you've heard stories where people say there's always interferences with their mechanical devices,
Right.
cell phones, anything that puts out a signal, it's eaten alive, and the batteries go dead quickly and,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. I don't think for a second that it's funny. I'm not into this whole. Gosh, please don't think I'm being bad when I say this, but the whole woo thing where interdimensional. If Bigfoot wants to, he'll just step through that loop right there and disappear. If you had that capability, then you would never see me. I'd never leave a track. I wouldn't even play that game with you. So I have a hard time with that. But there is something to be said with there's parts in this planet that have such a different energy to them, magnetic field or whatever it is. I've been at a place where a 6 feet of difference. If I'm standing here, I'm fine. If I step 6 feet away, everything I'm wearing feels heavy. The gravity feels heavier. And there's a location on this planet I've been to that I got permission to be at this place because it is so unique in the things that happen there.
Yeah.
Why do we don't question every compass points north? There's things on this planet we'll never understand, we'll never get, but there's energies that come with a lot of these sightings as well.
Have you
I
ever
know there's-
experienced that wall of fear? Like one minute everything's fine, and the next minute you're on high alert and the hair is standing up on the back of your neck.
Many times.
Yeah.
The time I spent in the military taught me to trust that. Being in the forest, when I get that feeling, it's not a bolt and run and be terrified. It's like, okay, there's something here and I have eyes
Sure.
on me and I know it. And that's when you become hyper vigilant. You start looking in the trees for mountain lions, on the ground for whatever, and you start watching. And my biggest fear in the forest, honestly, is another man. That's the only thing that I fear on this planet.
Me too.
Is the volatility of a man who has nothing to lose.
Right.
I'm not worried about, if a bear gets me, that, he gets me. He was hungry. I look like a
He's
soft
just
shell
doing
burrito.
what bears do. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't hold it against them, but men are, humans are devious. If they want what you have, they're going to take it.
Well, in
So
all the
true.
years that you've been doing research, have you ever had a sighting yourself?
Have you watched the show?
Well, the show sometimes is a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say deceptive. It's a little, it leaves some things to be desired, I would say.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. A lot of times TV is sensationalized, but I will tell you something about what I do in the show.
Mhm.
I have one single camera guy, and I'm the unguided missile. Nobody tells me where to go or what to do. I go where I feel like I want to go. I'm on my fifth camera guy. I don't make it easy on anyone.
You wear them out.
That's true. I'm on
Uh-huh.
my fifth camera guy. I go where I feel like I need to go and what draws me to it. What I saw in California that stood up and walked away like a man that I perceived as a bear for over a half hour.
Mm.
That makes no sense to me.
Before it walked away, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was watching the hillside, maybe a mile down I have a spotting scope, so I'm watching a mile down the way. There's a sow and her two baby cubs, and they're rolling around and they're being obnoxious. And then up on the hillside, I'm watching this thing by this fallen down log.
Hmm.
And it looks like a bear just rooting around. And that's what they do. They digging and grubbing. The sow and the cub went over the ridge line, so I was no longer interested in watching that. So I'm watching this thing for over a half hour.
Hmm.
And it stood up, arms, head. If it was a bear, you know how the side profile of a bear is
Right.
going to be that way out in front of
Sure.
it.
Sure.
Short little
Straight
legs.
little
when they-
legs. This thing stood up, walked away, striding like a man.
Hmm.
It's like if you're sitting here talking to me and I just kind of crumble down and walk away and I'm suddenly a dog. It made no sense. It didn't fit the narrative at all. I think that was something we caught on film that still has me upside down.
Well, that brings up a whole another set of questions. Just that one sighting was it a bear at first and then became a Sasquatch, or
Oh,
was
don't
a
go
Sasquatch-
Skinwalker on me right now.
But
Shape shifting, no. That would be a little bit too tough for me to wrap my head around at this point.
Well, but a lot of people have seen Sasquatches on all fours.
on all fours.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of
agreed.
people.
But you've seen many bears, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like you looked at that and thought, that's a really strange looking bear. You thought it was a bear when
The
you
whole
looked at
time.
it. Okay.
The whole time.
Well, I just got the signal that our time is up and
Yeah, when they go like this and wrap it
yeah,
up.
cut, go, get out.
Fun's over.
Well, thank you,
All
Russell,
right,
for giving us a few minutes and
Yep.
we're going to edit this and we'll put it out there probably in the next few days. But
Excellent.
very impressive to meet you and
Thank you.
to hear your story a little bit, and hope you have a great rest of the day here at the Bigfoot Days in Estes Park.
Nice meeting you too.
Nice meeting you, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
I'd like to talk to him for about an hour and a half or two.
We can arrange that.
Okay.
yeah.
Man.
So, well, that was great hearing from all three of them and getting different perspectives. Obviously, they have different perspectives on everything we've been talking about. And if someone interviewed us, we'd have a different perspective again. So
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing about Sasquatch research is there's so much we don't know. There's so
Yeah.
much we don't.
Yeah. He even just with him, when he thinks he's observing a bear for 30 minutes until it stands up. So it was probably,
It never- yeah.
it was obviously on the ground digging up or looking for something.
But
And
there
then,
was a sow and a cub there as well. that
yeah, he
left.
said I guess this thing was up the mountain more and those guys were down in a valley or something, but I mean, just the way they present themselves
Yeah.
in different situations to different people in different regions, but then there's also those patterns. Like there's so many patterns that are across the whole planet. Like, there's some things you can say Sasquatch does this as well as Sasquatch does not. I mean, to me, it's so fascinating how they show themselves in
Yeah.
different circumstances in different ways.
Maybe one day we'll all understand, but we've been doing this a long time, and that day has never come. That we have a live Sasquatch or a dead Sasquatch
Yeah.
that can be analyzed, and so at
Well,
least
even
not
if
public.
even if you had a dead Sasquatch, to me, still the mystery that would not end the mystery of who and what these beings are.
And I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to contain a live Sasquatch, to be honest, for very long. So
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to
No, I
be
wouldn't
anywhere
either.
around that. Like, I wouldn't want to. I would be devastated to see a Sasquatch in some kind of a cage. Like, literally, I would just
well,
be.
just as I said earlier, that the first pygmies that were captured were treated like they were a kind of monkey, and
Yeah.
these were humans being put in a cage and treated like an animal until somebody figured out that, wait a minute,
Yeah.
they act a lot like us, and that's, I think, what Russell was saying is over the years he's realized Sasquatch acts a lot like us,
Oh,
more
yeah.
than they act like a gorilla.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
and I think sometimes they make gorilla sounds just to make us even more confused about what they really are. So
Yeah. Oh, it was so fascinating that what he said about what he experienced. Those two sounded like it fighting, and not a single sound. Like how wasn't there like a or a grunt or some kind of sound?
that would be I've got to hear more about that story, because that, just the sound of flesh against flesh and bodies hitting the ground, is terrifying and fascinating all at the same time.
And did they do DNA evidence on the blood that was
Blood.
on that?
That's a great question, because they had plenty of blood apparently to use. So
They must have, or
they
yeah.
must have, because with a show that has money, why not? That's what are you going to analyze? That's what you got to analyze.
Yeah.
Is
I
it
wished we'd
blood?
asked him that, and I didn't think about
It
it.
wasn't two people. I'm pretty sure it wasn't two people fighting in the woods. So
Yeah. Well, if you see him later today, you'll have to ask him that
I will.
question. Let us know.
But, well, thank you, Sibylla, for
Thank you.
joining me again, and for all of our listeners and podcast fans, we hope you'll subscribe and encourage other people to tune in, and to this episode and to the others that we're going to be dropping in the coming months.
Yes. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great time at the
I'm gonna
Bigfoot
go
Days.
enjoy myself now.
Yeah. Give Stephanie my love.
Okay. Bye-bye, Sibylla.
Bye-bye.